Alright, we've just finished putting on the splice plates here between the long red band along the roof and the two panels toward the front of the facility. So we can put that aside, and we'll turn our attention now to the side wall of the pallet storage area, where we're going to attach all of the roof and column beams like this. So there's 5 of them, and I'm not sure why, but I got a request from one of my viewers to include the gluing process on the video. So this is for that viewer. I apologize to those of you who might not find this more interesting than watching grass grow, but there you are. This is how I glue these parts together. You see, I've previously drawn up these lines so I know exactly where they're going. I left the gaps in the splice plates, and to make sure it's lined up correctly for the roof angle, I hold the roof beam flat against the surface, and that way I know for sure it's in the right location with respect to the height. You can see there's a bit of a gap here because, as I mentioned in the last video, I didn't quite cut them correctly to be consistent with the prototype. They were consistent with the drawings, but not consistent with the prototype, which I eventually ended up following. So this glue that I'm using, Plastruct Weldine, is, as I've mentioned before, a non-toxic version of what some consider a toxic version. But the neat thing about it is that it's a little bit slower in how it reacts. So you have actually got lots of time to make sure it sets. You can, it slowly bonds. It melts a bit of the plastic on either side, but it gives you time to move it around. Even as it seems fixed, you can apply some force, and you can actually get it to move a bit. So I'm not going to film all of these because I think you'll be bored to tears, but just do this last one, and I'll move on to another part of the video. Here we are. Now, with all 5 of these beams and columns in place, we can connect the front face of the pallet storage area. So it will become freestanding the moment I do that. And you'll notice there's a bit of a lip on the front wall here where I installed the column so that it tucks in with the edge of the wall and effectively hides that edge. Just make sure we get enough glue in there. Put a touch on the side here as well. And here we have our wall. Voila. Just hold that for a second until it bonds. How does that look? Now, before we turn our attention to assembling all the big pieces into one combined facility, we need to first finish off our discussion on the raised floor area for the pallet loading part of the building. So you can see here I've taken a stab at the first 3 sections from these parts that come with the pipe stuff kits. You'll notice that this extends beyond the wall of the pallet storage area, and the reason for that is the tracks that come into the building are a little bit further away from the actual wall of the pallet storage area. So you see, obviously this is further out, but just to give you a sense of where the tracks are, we need to have the floor, the elevated floor, extend close to where the door openings would be for the boxcars that are shoved into the building. So I've measured that out to fit as close as possible without the cars actually hitting the floor, and that's the length. So I'm going to have to continue this now on both sides, the full length of the pallet storage building. Once that's completed, I will cut out a section of 040 styrene, big rectangle, and set it in place, and then this piece can sit on top of it. I will paint it a concrete color first, of course. Once that's set on top of it, then we can circle back and hopefully assemble the rest of the building. Alright, now our pallet storage building has a concrete floor, as we talked about, but because the whole transfer facility is laid out at an angle to the back wall, one side of the floor is shorter than the other. So what I've done is cut out a template down on the layout using a triangle against the rails of the track inside the building, and cut out a simple template to the back wall that I used to transfer to this sheet of 040 styrene, as well to use to measure out the different length here of the side concrete walls. The concrete walls are held together with little splice bars made from the same pieces that we used for the walls, just cut up into smaller pieces. And so this is ready to go. It's been measured out on the styrene, and using the steel square we can cut a nice straight line along the styrene with our X-Acto blade. Make sure you continue to apply pressure to the square, otherwise your X-Acto will slip and you'll have multiple cuts. This piece is a little smaller, so we'll just carefully hold this tight and run it across. Just run the knife a few more times along these cuts that we've made here, and it'll pop right out, and we'll glue it in place. And here we have our concrete floor all finished and ready for the paint shop. Here we are back at the layout, and I wanted to do a bit of a test fit with the pallet storage area and the concrete floor before I go any further, painting, etc. If we take a step back and look at the plans, you'll note that the left side main structure columns actually go through the concrete floor. So on the drawing they appear to be that much shorter than the right side columns. And I don't know if this was built that way, or whether the superstructure went up first and they poured the concrete floor around the columns. I really can't see what the foundations are from this drawing. But in any case, when I manufactured my columns and beams, I mass produced them all at the same size. So you can tell all of these columns on this side here are about a ½ inch too high now to account for the height of the concrete floor. So I either have to cut a hole in the floor or trim them back. One of the concerns I have is that because there's no outside wall here running the whole height, they're going to be a bit wobbly, even when they're glued to the roof beams for the pallet storage area. These two columns here I'm not worried about because they'll have the floor to ceiling wall holding them in place. All these guys here that pop out higher than the pallet storage area will be connected, of course, with the single row of siding that's painted red. But I'm still concerned that it might still be a bit wobbly. So I'm going to have to look into a possible solution to kind of fix the bottoms in place, other than simply trying to glue the bottom of the cut columns to the concrete floor. So that's something that we'll look into next. So here's the solution that I developed. We know that the roof beams for the pallet storage area are 3½ inches long. We know the wall is 1/16 of an inch thick. So we could draw a line on the floor of the concrete loading area that's 3 9/16 of an inch from the edge to mark out where the edge of the columns go. And since we know the columns are 3 7/16 of an inch apart, we can mark out where they're going to land. So what I've chosen to do is cut notches in the floor and trim the bottom of the columns, for those that land on the concrete floor, to remove the flanges and just leave the center portion of the web. And that way, when the columns are installed, there'll be no wobble. This will be held together by that piece there, and the bottoms won't move because they'll be tight in the slots here. For the end piece, I've cut out a notch because the very last, or the very first column runs right along the edge, and so if I cut like I did here for these, it wouldn't look right. So the actual column that goes here runs all the way down to the ground without a cutout. Instead, I cut out the floor, or notched it out, so from this side it will fit. Here's a look at all the bits and pieces coming together, not glued in yet, just to show you what it looks like. So here's the outside walls of the pallet storage area, and they line up with each of these columns, or they will once they're glued in. And of course, this piece here will rest on top. So that gives you a rough picture of what this side of the building is going to look like. The next step is to paint the floor of the pallet storage area concrete color, and then we start gluing all these major sub-assemblies together, and we'll have one big building ready for the roof. And here is the almost finished building. All we're left to do now is put on the roof and try and carry it down to the layout room without breaking it. So let's take a closer look. We've got the pallet storage area on its concrete base. The concrete that I used was
Krylon. It's pebble color. It's got a close approximation to concrete. So we'll walk around the building. You'll see what it looks like from the inside. Concrete shows up more. Here's our front. Long right side wall. There's a peek inside. So these two gray beams here are where I might have a removable section of roof, so we'll be able to look inside and see the pallet storage area. Here you see the concrete floor, and you see how the columns look like they're resting on the concrete, but they have their pins that slip into it to hold them steady. Got a suggestion of a concrete staircase that I might add to get down to track level. And you can see that the yellow crane rails have now been installed. So we're really just waiting on the roof. One last thing. Because our building is at an angle to the back wall, you can see that there's a bit of trim required. Right along there, you see. There's a piece of this roof beam that I've marked that needs to be sliced off, and we'll need to trim a touch of the yellow crane rail, and this piece of the red wall has got to be clipped so it sits flush against the back wall of the layout.